Howdy guys, Attorney Walter Hnot. Now we're going to be going through a video that is a little bit unusual from what we usually cover on this Social Security Disability YouTube channel. We always usually talk about retirement or disability benefits or things along that line. But in this instance, we're going to be talking about something that is a little bit different. And the reason why, I just saw my dog come through the door, so now the door's open. The reason why is that at the end of the day, I want you guys to know what some of the best criminals are doing when it comes to theft. And here's why. A lot of the traditional wiggle room that we would see in America when it comes to financial bottom of the barrel situations, they're all going away. When we had massive inflation, blame whoever you want. You can blame the corporations, you can blame Biden, whatever. I don't care. But when we had massive inflation, and we're still having it, it's still terrible. It started to make things at the very bottom of the barrel too expensive for even those who were doing what society requested of them. These are your, very bottom of the barrel, earning absolutely nothing, can barely survive, etc. Now, you have one of two groups, right? You have those who are on a benefit, retired, Social Security disability insurance benefits, supplemental security income benefits, disabled adult child, widows. You've all, temporary assistance for needy families, young moms with young kids kind of deal. You have this population of people who get a check. And then you have a population of people who don't get any check at all. And so what happens is we see this population, right, the group that doesn't get a check at all, feeding on this population, the group that basically gets a check. So what would happen is my client, who I did not represent for the murder charges, but I am representing for the disability claim, murders obviously were on his file. He wasn't always, although one time he was the main perpetrator of that particular criminal act. But the bottom line is now I'm representing him for the disability benefits. And I begged him to literally come onto this show and explain how essentially it works when it comes to people getting robbed, this idea of theft, this idea of stealing. So, I asked my claimant to come on the channel and just answer some live questions. He said no. I asked him to come on the channel and just basically tell his story. Doesn't have to deal with the questions, can just read them if he wants to. Didn't want to come on the channel. I asked him to do a pre-recorded video with his approval before prior release. He said he didn't want to come on the channel. I asked him to do a pre-recorded video where basically we would obscure his image. Didn't want to come on it. We would obscure his audio, his vocals. Didn't want to come on it. He just did not want to go ahead and come on the show, but he said I could go ahead and explain what he used to do with theft. And from my understanding, interacting with him, he's in a program right now, dual diagnosis. Bottom line is that he really doesn't want to live that life anymore. He's got bullet wounds, he's got stab wounds, he's got all that stuff. So let's go through this real quick. This is what he would do essentially to commit theft. And it's pretty damn incredible because when you think about it, it's much more in line with the way a criminal takes on crime than how the police, sheriffs, or any of these other authority figures really teach us to interact with it. So let me kind of go into it real quick, give you a quick summation. So theft is the crime of stealing. It's converting one person's possessions or ownership to someone else. There's all kinds of legal doctrines, chattel, real property, all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to simplify it down the way that he explained it to me, which was a very E equals MC squared version of doing the crime of stealing. You need three people. And this is what he did. I don't know if this is the best way to do it, but this is the way he did it. So you need three people. One for the take, the person taking the items. One for the distraction, the person distracting the victim. And one for the misleading statement thereafter, the person who then was a witness who would then give a statement to the police about what they saw actually occurring. He explained it in a non-academia style format to myself, so I'm going to try and just give it to you in kind of like a filling in the gaps version. It was more of examples of what he would do than analysis. So remember, this guy's got a serious record, serious criminal, but still a human being. He did what he did. That's just, it is what it is. Some of you will have some, moral compass problem with even listening to this video. If you're one of those types of people, you are too fragile to use the internet. You're just too fragile. You need to get off the internet because if you can't handle it, you need to get off the internet. Okay. So first off, he's a generational criminal. Okay. His parents would do criminal acts. his kids are doing some of those criminal acts, generational situation. This is how he would get money. Okay. So the first example he would give me, and I guess this is the example I'm going to spend the most time on because I don't want to do every single example because it'll just take too much time, but you'll understand what trick he was doing from this example. So what would happen is a lot of times this would be a car situation and somebody would go ahead and basically pull up with a car. And what's important to understand with this is that you, as he put it, would not approach them when they were getting out of the car. He would approach them once they were getting back into their car, or once they were in their car. So what he would do is he would make sure that the car, first and foremost, was parked in a spot where there was something in front of it or something behind it. For this example, we'll just use something that's in front of it. So let's say there's a pole in front of it, or there's like a curb, or this building. You can't drive forward. Okay. And so, what would happen is, and he had this really funny name for this is like his second tier girlfriend, which was like in basketball terms for each one of his girlfriends that he would have. Like one would be the bench seater, one would be like anyway, the point is he would use his second tier girlfriend to walk behind the car, as the person sat into the car and looked up to see who was behind. And that would create in their mind this expectation that they could not back up. And so the idea was that their brain, the victim's brain, would know they can't back up. So they're in a box. So the first thing that basically said was you have to create a box where the crime's going to occur. And obviously make sure there's no cameras, make sure it's in an area that's not, where other people are watching, etc. Okay. So the next thing is he had this custom item that he kind of built, and he explained to me it changed over time. So the first one he built was 2 heavy moving blankets. They were kind of sewed together, but in between them, right, was studio foam, like you would see in a recording studio. And you can just buy it on eBay, buy it on Amazon, but it's sound absorption foam. And so what he would do is he would go ahead and take this blanket with the foam in between, and he would essentially throw it on top of the car where the window was for the driver's side seat if the window was closed. And then he would hit the window with a little sledgehammer, like a handheld sledgehammer. And then once he hit it, he would push it through and towards specifically the driver. And he said, as he got better, he would throw a towel on the ground where we'd hit the window. So when the glass fell, it would fall on the towel. But he said the most risky thing of all was essentially the scream that would happen. And different people scream. And like one of the things that he would know by gauging people or judging people is how they would actually scream, how they would react to something. And so, essentially he then evolved to the point where basically, at one point he had a jacket where he'd opened up this puffer jacket, and it was this really, really, really big jacket, like a really long one. And he put inside it that foam and basically kind of like pulled it together, sewed it together, and then used that, put it against the window and hit it with a hammer. And he said, the big problem with this whole thing was when he had to break a window. So what he preferred were picking people who essentially, did not have their window up. If their window was down, he could go ahead and throw it over the top of the car, push it in and slam it against the person's face. Now, at that point, right, he would hit them as hard as he could in the face. That's what he would do to make sure that they were kind of knocked out, immobilized, etc., which is a terrible thing. Now, there are certain parts of this that I agreed not to share or talk about. He literally said at the end of the conversation, I don't want you to talk about what I did with this or what I did with that because, criminally could, cause some issues for him. So what he would do is when he basically had this all kind of go down, obviously he would take the stuff that he needed, take the stuff that he wanted. The person would wake up, where they were because they would get knocked out. But what would happen is at some point they would do an investigation, and that third person who was the witness is somebody that he knew who could talk about essentially, to the police what happened. So 3 people to the crime. There was the person who would distract the person behind the car, so the person wouldn't be able to back up. They'd be thinking, I can't back up. There's a human being there. And then basically he would go ahead and break the window or just push this big blanket or later the big coat in and then against the face of the person. And then he would punch the person in the face as hard as he could. And then the third person would give a statement to the police as to what happened. But obviously it was a false statement. Okay. So the point that I'm getting at with this, I think is really important to realize, is that we are going to see a significant uptick in petty crime, right? So kind of misdemeanor, maybe reaching to felony type crime. And a lot of it is going to be based on theft. There are certain things that happen. We saw them in 2008 to 2009. They happened with criminal activity. They happened with how the government interacted with the people, and the government got money hungry and it needed more money. So it was going to try and basically get as much as it could out of the people and raise taxes and do this. So what happened was we're now facing a 2008 like situation. And he was very successful at doing this particular crime over and over and over again. And the thing is, he would only need to change 2 people out. And as long as he knew a bunch of people, one could play a different part. However, the one he consistently used that was the same person was his girlfriend, who would walk behind the car, because it makes the person's brain think, oh my God, I can't go backwards because I'm going to murder somebody. So my suggestion, I asked him, I was like, well, did you ever have one that got away? And he said, no. And I said, well, why is that? And he said, well, the thing is this: when the person's brain says, I can't run over somebody behind me, they mentally trap themselves. But if they were to immediately just put their car in reverse and hit the pedal, they would be gone, right? They'd be able to move. They'd be able to get out of the way. But the thing is, he got so quick at it over a short period of time of, basically breaking the glass and then hitting the person, that people didn't have enough time to think to go ahead and put it in reverse. And I said, well, okay, well, did you ever try it with a person where they weren't walking behind the car? And he said, no, because he knew that he needed that to give him extra time, because the person's brain had to take away their escape options. And so, the only thing that people would do is try and fight towards the window when they should have just been putting the car in reverse and reversing as hard as they can backwards. This guy, look, he's a top-notch drug dealer. He was one of the best of Florida. He would figure out ways to do crime better every time. And I think the thing that really hurts criminals is that everybody has a camera somewhere. My property is 4 different types of security camera systems that are up, because I don't just trust one. And with the YouTube channel, I've literally had people park up, on the street and yada, yada. When I go to the airport to fly to New Jersey to work on the horse farm, people recognize me in the airport. So the thing is, that you have to keep in mind with this whole thing, he figured out in a methodical approach by approach method, like the elements, like how a lawyer approaches a problem, how to do this to teach the brain of the victim to try and fight the immediate source instead of escaping. And I thought that was pretty brilliant. And here's why. Most of the criminals I come across that I represent do not approach things in such a methodical manner. What was unique about him, and I think this is something that's unique about criminals in general that are real hardcore felons or have not been caught yet, but are doing those activities, when there's generational criminal activity, grandparents to parents to kids, right? There's a whole different level of approach to how crime should be taken on or committed. And they're, in my opinion, much better at doing the balancing test. They know what the time is. They know how the time is served. They know what the penalties are. And they're much better at understanding, because when you have like a young kid, the young kid is just as willing to commit a crime as they are to join up the military. They don't know. That's the bottom line. You take an 18-year-old, they're just as willing to commit a crime to get ahead as they are to join the military. Maybe commit a crime to get ahead even more now than they are to join the military. So the thing that I would ask you guys, and I think this is important, and let's call it like it is, it's a marginalized group, somebody who's on fixed income, somebody who's disabled or receiving retirement benefits. When it comes to types of crimes that you've seen, or things that you've tried to avoid, or circumstances that you were worried about, or methods that you use to prevent crimes, being committed on you, what do? What are other things that people should watch out for? And the reason I bring this up is that this guy was good at what he would do. He wasn't afraid to hurt people. He wasn't afraid to get hurt. he knew how to use resources. And one of the amazing things was that this was a guy who, for the most part, had zero education in a traditional sense, but at the same time was a whiz on the internet, knew how to like go from website to app to this to that, and know how to use things. So to me, what that was like, it was like watching a multi-millionaire, even though obviously he wasn't, um, approach things. You know, when people look at, you know, certain really wealthy people, they approach things by this tool creates this product. And that's the way he approached things. It was just from a very street oriented version of it. And so, you know, what happens is that at the end of the day, he would go ahead and figure out the tools that he needed to commit the crime in a more effective way. Now, when you see like crimes on TV, you know, like the perfect Italian crime, the Italian job, or whatever, stuff like that, that's all done where they throw in a bunch of extra steps to go ahead and make a movie out of it, right? And then there's some love story in there and blah, 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 blah. His approach to crimes was taking all of that crap out of it and then saying, what is the least amount of gear that I need to make this happen? Who are the fewest amount of people that I need to make this happen? And it was a team mentality. Every time that, you know, he said that he would approach a victim that he was going to attack, it was basically, you know, one of those things where everybody on the team knew what was going on. Like everybody had a mini pep talk before what was going to happen. You know, everybody knew when that car came up and one person made a particular move that they were going to attack that car, all those things. So anyways, guys, I thought I would share this to you because from my standpoint and really loving audio, I just never thought of audio in that sense, you know, like sound absorption audio being used with carjacking. I just never thought of it. So anyways, guys, I'll catch you a little bit later. We're going to have a couple more videos I think are really relevant as to what's coming up when it comes to 2023. You guys have an absolutely wonderful day, and we'll go from there. Thanks so much, guys. Have fun. Bye-bye, guys. Bye-bye.